The first boss in the Fall of Deathwing is Ultraxion, one of Deathwing's experiments who draws you into the Twilight Realm to fight. This fight has a few things to keep in mind for both DPS, tanks and healers. Everyone needs to keep an eye on when he casts the Hour of Twilight. The DPS and healers should all use Heroic Will, the clickable ability you get, which will temporarily transport you to the normal realm. If you have a bar mod that doesn't show extra abilities, you should keybind extra action button 1 to something easily accessible before the fight starts. Heroic Will only last for roughly 4 seconds, so you need to wait for a few seconds before clicking it to avoid getting hit. The optimal time to activate Heroic Will is roughly halfway through the Hour of Twilight cast. If you don't use Heroic Will, you will take 195,000 unresistible shadow damage. For the DPS, also note you shouldn't use any abilities that normally put you behind the boss, such as Feral, Cat Charge, Killing Spree and similar. It will make you fall off the platform to your death. Generally, such abilities should be coded not to work in this encounter. For example, cats get the error no path available, but sometimes it bugs out and lets you use them anyway, so just stay away from hitting the button. For the tanks, you need to keep an eye out on the Fading Light debuff. It lasts for 5 to 10 seconds, and if it runs out while you're still in the Twilight Realm, it will instantly kill you. You have to use Heroic Will when there's roughly 3 seconds left of the debuff. The other tank will have to taunt, because as soon as you get Fading Light, it prevents you from generating aggro. And then when you use Heroic Will, Ultraxion will start numbing on the DPS if the other tank fails to taunt. Thrall also gives the tank the Last Defenders of Azeroth buff, which reduces defensive cooldowns by 50% and increases defensive ability duration by 100%. So use those cooldowns when you have them. If you're the tank tanking when it casts Hour of Twilight, pop a damage reduction cooldown to prevent as much of the damage as you can. For the healers, this is a really intense fight. There is a lot of AoE damage going around, especially the longer into the fight you get and the more unstable Ultraxion becomes. Along with this, the tank damage is pretty harsh and you have to be on your toes for the tank swaps. And there's always DPS and other healers that will fail on using the Heroic Will on the Hour of Twilight. As a healer, it's harder to keep track of the cast time, but as soon as you see the warning for the cast, wait 2 to 3 seconds and then hit Heroic Will. Throughout the fight, the different aspects will spawn 2 crystals each with different properties. Sometimes after the first Hour of Twilight, Alexstrasza spawns 2 red crystals to the left behind the raid. Only click on one of them because you will need 2 healers with a buff. This buff increases healing done by 100% for the duration of the fight. Further into the fight, Ysera spawns 2 green crystals to the right behind the raid. If you already have the Alexstrasza buff, do not touch the other crystals. The buffs do not stack and you want as many healers as possible to have buffs. Ysera's buff will cause all healing done to be duplicated and evenly distributed between all friendly targets within 50 yards for the duration of the fight. Towards the end of the fight, Kaleka spawns 2 blue crystals behind the raid. This buff reduces the mana costs of all spells by 75% and increases spell haste by 100%. Again, if you have either of the previous buffs, leave this one alone to the last 2 healers. This fight is a survival DPS race, so make sure to use Heroic Will, because generally healers will struggle with just healing the normal AoE damage and keeping the tanks alive. And tanks, remember to taunt and use your cooldowns.